Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to Martinis with Scott. Episode, what are we today? Episode 120, I believe. We are just doing our daily touch base on a Thursday afternoon. I hope everybody is well. You know, on Thursdays we do we have a drink together. We have a drink together at 4 p.m. Eastern. So that show is out at 4 p.m. I'm having a martini. Join me for a drink. It's an hour long. And as a result, I try to keep our Thursday daily touch bases just pretty simple. I'll do a lot of reading today, so I'm sorry my eyes are not on screen. I'm talking today about the CCAA filing of Laurentian University. CCAA is a bankruptcy filing, Company Creditors Arrangement Act in Canada, very similar to a Chapter 11 proceeding in the US. You go to a judge, you go to a bankruptcy judge, you make a bunch of filings, you say, hey, help me, I can't pay my bills, I'm insolvent, I need to restructure, and I need your help, Mr. Bankruptcy Court Judge, to get that restructuring done. So a little background, Laurentian is a university. In the US, you would think of it as a university/college, which is located 400 kilometers, 250 odd miles north of Toronto in Sudbury, Ontario. 60-year-old school, provides undergraduate and graduate degree programs in business, engineering, medicine, social sciences. Employs 1,751 people, 1,751 employees as of December 30th, 2020. It owes Canadian banks $91 million. I don't know what date that is, but it filed in February 21. So somewhere around there, it owed Canadian banks $91 million. Filing that one of those. Yeah, Sudbury, Ontario-based university requested court protection. We already talked about that, and its reason for citing CCAA for needing court protection for filing CCAA is it cited widening deficits, so it's losing more money, declining enrollment, and costs related to the pandemic. And so that's a badly worded sentence, but increased costs related to the pandemic, tied to declining enrollment, obviously related to the pandemic, and widening deficits, which is a result of the first two items. Laurentian is one of the financially weakest universities in the province. That would be the province of Ontario. I think the largest province in Canada. I know the largest province of Canada. And we intend to change that. President Robert Hash, I think we would pronounce his name, said in the statement, total liabilities are $321.8 million. According to Ernst & Young, currently owes 70. Yeah, so that would include the bank debt that I talked about before. And of the bank debt, 71 million is owed to Royal Bank of Canada, 18.5 to TD, Toronto Dominion Bank, and 1.3 million to Bank of Montreal. So three separate banks in there. I'm not sure if they're syndicated. It's probably a syndicated facility as to why it's expressed like that. It says that the financial situation deteriorated and unsecured credit lines became unavailable during the pandemic. No kidding. Laurentian began the process of obtaining a new $25 million secured interim financing, known as a debtor in possession DIP loan from Firm Capital Corp, a boutique bank in Toronto. So what is a DIP loan, a debtor in possession? Here's a lesson that we can talk about from this. When you go to the bank and you say, when you go to the court and you say, hey, I can't pay my bills, the banks won't give me more money, I've tried. And so what I need here is I need to put a stop. I need you, judge, to put a stop to all of the problems that are coming at me on this side, right? So I've got the Royal Bank and BMO and TD and all my unsecured creditors, and they're all coming at me, and I just want you to put a stop to that. Just give me some breathing room so that we can restructure. But on this side over here, I need some more cash because I can't make my payroll because every day I'm losing money. And so I want you to approve a loan from, in this case, Firm Capital. I know one person that works there is a really good dude, but I don't really know that shop. In Toronto, I want you to approve this debtor in possession loan for Firm Capital. What the judge says, okay, here's the order. I'm going to put a stop to all these people coming after you, and then we'll work on that. and I'm going to allow you to borrow some money, and the money that you borrow is secured above everybody else. Everybody except for the professionals, the administration charge that goes into a CCAA. So, the monitor needs to be paid in that. But apart from that, the DIP loan ranks ahead of BMO, ranks ahead of all the banks, ranks ahead of everybody, and gives you some money to operate while we sort this thing out and try to save the job and to save the business, in this case, the university. So that's what a DIP loan is, okay? And debtor in possession just means that you, the business, are the debtor, and you're in possession of your own assets, and you want to borrow some money against them. Now, Ross Romano, Ontario's Minister of Colleges and Universities. So this is someone from the government, and if you're in the US, this would be like a state government official. In Canada, it's a province. Said this situation is unprecedented. You're damn right it is. I've never heard of a university seeking bankruptcy protection, and the whole reason I'm doing this show is it's unique, it's interesting, and if it works, maybe every single university in the country will be looking to file CCAA in bankruptcy, and I'll tell you why. The government named somebody special advisor. Who cares who that is? The government will be exploring its options. So in Canada, a great deal of the funding from universities come from the government. I don't have a percentage off the top of my head, but they're not completely independent for-profit organizations. They have a ton of government funding. The government is probably one of the major, if not the major, stakeholders in the university. And it says, so the government here is saying, wow, this is unprecedented. And we're going to look for greater oversight of university finances to better protect the interests of students and Ontario taxpayers. Government wants to ensure this issue does not repeat itself in other institutions. How would the government make sure this issue does not repeat itself in other institutions? One of two ways, I would think, practically speaking. Doesn't say this in the news or in the press releases, but it would seem to be, number one, the government just gives them a bunch more money so that they can just keep spending, right? That does, as a taxpayer, I wouldn't be happy about that, but that would be one solution to make sure this issue doesn't repeat itself. To seek bankruptcy protection, you kind of have to be bankrupt. You have to be insolvent. And if the government just keeps handing you money, you're not insolvent, you can't use the courts to help you restructure. And another way to do it would be to frustrate the other way to make sure this doesn't happen again would be to frustrate the entire process as a stakeholder and have this university just kind of disappear or not be able to have a sustainable restructuring. And that way it wouldn't encourage other universities to go through the same process, right? So those are your two options. I don't like either of those options. So that's an interesting position of the government. We'll see how that unfolds. Laurentian said in the court filing that it had tried to reduce costs with job cuts and a hiring freeze. So they tried to cut jobs and they tried to freeze hiring, but they couldn't. Why couldn't they? And I'll tell you the answer. It doesn't say this here, is union contracts, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Salaries and benefits represent the university's most significant expense of 67% of total expenses. So 2/3 of your total expenses in this business of the university is salary and expenses. I will tell you the other big expense is real estate and maintenance and the operations that go along with this. And so basically all your costs are fixed costs. I'll come back to that point. University also has a pension deficit. This is also just part of your HR issue. Pension plan has a solvency ratio of 85.4% and a deficiency of $4.5 million. Not a hugely material number in the context of the amount of money and liabilities that they have. You got to wonder how bad this was before the markets turned so frothy in the last year or two. So that's an interesting question. What does this say? It says here that I'm reading from newspaper articles from Sudbury that the company's creditor, the CCAA, means that the university must give control of his finances to a third-party monitor, in this case Ernst & Young. That's just not true. That's absolutely flat out wrong. In bankruptcy protection, you on CCAA, on Chapter 11, in a notice of intent to file a proposal in Canada, you retain control of your affairs. You're monitored. and you're monitored so that the monitor can report to the judge and say, hey, here's what's been going on. Here's some things you might want to be aware of, Mr. Judge. Here's some shenanigans happening, but you're in control of your affairs. Okay, so there's some background for this whole thing. Here's the argument from the two sides. The two sides being the university. We already heard about what the government had to say about this, and then we're going to hear about what the union has to say about this. So Laurentian's legal counsel, DJ Miller of Thornton Grout Finnegan, that's a Toronto-based bankruptcy law firm, started off the hearing by laying out the university's financial picture, saying there are too many courses and too many programs taught by too many faculty for too few students. Too many, excuse me, too many courses, too many programs taught by too many faculty. So we got too many professors, too many courses, too many programs, too few students, right? That sounds like a bad ratio. And by the way, if I say to some of my friends around Bay Street in Toronto, or people that pay attention to this community of restructuring bankruptcy, and they're not involved with the Laurentian file, and I say, what's going on with Laurentian? That's exactly what they pair back to me. They'll say, oh, no, they got too many courses, too many professors, not enough students. That's exactly their persuasion message that has been delivered to the community. The union's response is said the CCAA is being used as an attempt to achieve concessions from the faculty. In other words, the bankruptcy court is being used as an attack on existing contracts, including union contracts, and not just the salaries and benefit and pension that derives from those contracts, but the other restrictions that exist in those contracts. It doesn't say this, I'm just telling you this is a fact. And the restrictions would be on hiring, rewards for motivation and good performance, and firing, okay? And so Charlie Sinclair, no relation to me, legal counsel for LUFA, which would be something to do with Laurentian University Union, said the union and its members have a, quote, target on their back. Yeah, you bet they do. Here's my thoughts on this and why I find it interesting. As you know, I am an expert. I have a great interest in, I love turnarounds and saving jobs. And that includes using as a tool bankruptcy courts from time to time when necessary, and doing restructurings. So this story is intriguing to me for that. The story is also intriguing to me because for several years, I won't name the university in this case, but for several years, I sat on a dean's advisory board for one of Canada's major business schools. And so I sat through regular meetings where we went over budgets and we talked about issues and we talked about how to improve the quality of the program. And 100% of the time, this discussion came back to what? It came back to too many programs, too many courses, too many faculty, not enough students. Therefore, are we running a deficit? All the fundraising we have to do just to keep up. Can we change anything? Can we hire marquee world-class professors? And I'm not picking on the capabilities of Canadian professors at all. There's some terrific professors, but can you go steal a professor from Harvard and bring them to a Canadian university business school? You cannot, because you can't afford to pay them unless you do something off the book with private sponsors and do crazy things, which are kind of sketchy. You just can't do it because the union contract won't let you spend the amount of money to bring in a star. Why do you need a star? You need a star to improve the marketability of your program, to bring in more enrollment, all those sorts of things. Okay, so you can't do that. You can't get rid of faculty very easily or at all. So you can't fire. If you want to streamline the courses that you're teaching, what are you going to do with these extra professors that you're carrying? What if a professor isn't performing well? It's really hard under the union contract to make changes to this. And don't forget, this union contract, as we just learned at Laurentian University, is 2/3 of your expenses. You can't do that. Can you reward, motivate existing faculty to do things differently to improve your program? No, you can't do that. There are ways to have rewards within minor rewards, I would say, to persuade professors to do certain things within the union contract, but they're not effective, and you're really handicapped. So you're just stuck. So that's why I have an interest in this. I've learned about this from sitting on a board. Union contracts prohibit growth and restructuring. It's hard to lay off, hard to hire, impossible to reward. Now, how do you deal with bad contracts? I was going to tell you a story, but I'm already done my 15 minutes. How do you deal with a locked-in contract when you're a business? What if your operations are breaking even and you're kind of fine, but you're stuck in a bad lease? You're stuck in a bad contract, union contract. You're stuck in a debt contract that you can't afford. The only, unless you have a voluntary restructuring with your counterparty, you got to go to bankruptcy court. You got to go to court, and probably bankruptcy court, but you need to go to a judge and you need to find a way to get out of that contract. You have no choice. The trick to that, though, if you're going to go to bankruptcy court, is you actually need to be insolvent. And if the government keeps handing you money, are you really insolvent? It's going to be interesting. I'll tell you this because of my experience that I just outlined for you. If, in fact, this is successful and Laurentian is able to restructure its commitments and its flexibility with its union partner, every university in Canada is going to look at this as a possibility. Every single one, because it's the only way to deal with contracts which are really damaging to the education of the students. Thank you for listening. Hey, join me at 4 p.m. Eastern for a martini or any drink that you want to have, and we'll talk about accountability. Thanks.